It all started with frustration, anger, and a thirst for freedom. Imagine being told what to do, what to buy, and how to live by a government thousands of miles away. That was the reality for the American colonists in the 1700s. They had no say in the laws being passed, yet they were expected to pay the price. And when that price became unbearable, revolution was inevitable. The British Crown, under King George III, ruled the American colonies with an iron grip. Taxes were imposed without representation, trade was controlled, and any opposition was crushed. The Stamp Act of 1765 was one of the first sparks. It forced colonists to buy British stamps for all paper goods, newspapers, legal documents, even playing cards. People were outraged. No taxation without representation became their battle cry. Protests erupted, and Britain responded with even stricter laws. Then came the Townshend Acts, placing duties on essential goods like tea, glass, and paint. The colonists were growing restless. Boycotts spread, and tensions rose to a boiling point. In 1770, in the streets of Boston, British soldiers fired into a crowd of unarmed colonists, killing 5. This became known as the Boston Massacre, a moment that turned public opinion against British rule. But Britain didn't back down. In 1773, they passed the Tea Act, making British tea the only legal option. It wasn't about the price, it was about control. So, one cold December night, a group of colonists, dressed as Mohawk Indians, boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into the Boston harbor. The Boston Tea Party was a direct act of defiance, and Britain's response was swift and brutal. The Intolerable Acts of 1774 shut down Boston's port, took away self-governance, and allowed British soldiers to take over homes. The colonies knew they had to unite. Delegates from across the 13 colonies met in Philadelphia at the First Continental Congress. They sent a letter to King George III, demanding their rights, but he ignored them. April 19, 1775. Lexington and Concord. The first shots of the Revolution rang out. No one knows who fired first, but the shot heard round the world marked the beginning of war. Farmers, merchants, and everyday men picked up arms to fight against the world's strongest military. They weren't professional soldiers. They were patriots, fighting for their future. As the war raged on, leaders emerged. George Washington, a bold and strategic commander, was chosen to lead the Continental Army. Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson penned one of the most powerful documents in history, the Declaration of Independence. On July 4, 1776, the colonies officially broke away from Britain, declaring that all men are created equal and have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the fight was far from over. The British, with their superior army, captured New York. Washington's forces suffered defeats, but they refused to give up. Then, a miracle at Trenton, on Christmas night, Washington and his men crossed the icy Delaware River, surprising the Hessian soldiers in a daring attack that turned the tide of war. The French took notice. After the American victory at Saratoga in 1777, France joined the fight, bringing in ships, money, and soldiers. The war stretched on for years. Battles were won and lost, but the determination of the American people never wavered. Then, in 1781, at Yorktown, Virginia, Washington's army, with help from the French, surrounded the British. After weeks of siege, British General Cornwallis surrendered. The war was over. 2 years later, in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, officially recognizing the United States as an independent nation. Against all odds, the colonies had defeated a superpower. A new nation was born, built on the ideals of freedom, democracy, and self-rule. The American Revolution was not just a war, it was the birth of a nation and an inspiration to oppressed people around the world. History is shaped by those who dare to stand up, who refuse to accept injustice, and who believe in a better future. The revolutionaries of 1776 did just that, and their legacy still echoes today. Freedom is never free, but it is always worth fighting for.